Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. I'm Michelle Witte, still here with Bob Schlehuber, kicking off our second hour with some more domestic, economic, and ethics conversations. And we might even try to talk a little bit more about markets. We're going to see where we get. If you want to join in, you can reach us at 202-521-1320. You can holler at us in the YouTube comments. You can yell at us on Twitter at Sputnik Misfits. There's all kinds of places to make your voice heard. And Bob and I are now joined by Steve Grumbine, founder and CEO of Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action, and the host of the podcast Macro and Cheese. Steve, good to have you back.
Hey, thanks for having me, Michelle. Thanks, Bob.
I'm very excited for this conversation. I think there's a lot to get into. I want to start off with this sort of a good news, bad news situation that seems to be happening politically and economically. I was pleased, for example, to see the Democrats vote as a bloc in the Senate to begin the budget reconciliation process with regard to this $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. And you had Chuck Schumer getting up saying the party's not going to dilute, dither, or delay it because the needs of the American people are just too great. So if Chuck Schumer was a person that you trusted, that might be reassuring. On the other hand, we have the U.S. Chamber of Congress and the Washington Post editorial page, to name two, pressing Democrats to lower the eligibility ceiling for these survival checks that are part of that package, saying a majority of households earning more than $50,000 a year haven't experienced loss of income. The thing is, Steve, that majority appears to be 55%. So you have 45% of households earning between $50,000 and $150,000 a year who have experienced a loss of income since March 2020, and 48% of households earning between $50,000 and $75,000 a year have. So that's a lot of people who are above this $50,000 threshold who have suffered and who are potentially going to be left out. And I'd also like to say, if you are a household in this country earning a total of $50,000 or $60,000 a year, you should just get a check anyway, because that's not a lot to live on in most of the United States. So I guess my question to start off to you is the glass half full or is it half empty? Are we looking at more good news for this week so far or bad? And should the Democrats start messing with these income thresholds?
All right, so I'm going to take you down the pathway that I see this, and hopefully this makes sense. I see anytime they break out the means testing angle, what they are doing is they are setting the stage for not only resentment but backlash, and they're creating a situation. This is not just for this particular spending package. This is for every bill that we see. Every single time we try to create some will get it, some will not get it, you create a situation where those benefits are temporary, that the people receiving them are somehow or another bunched into a grouping where they're not respected and they're treated poorly. Mm-hmm. And in my humble opinion, anytime you see means testing, you should immediately say this is not probably the best way of doing this. There are other ways of taxing that money away from wealthy people. There are other ways of socially engineering their spending habits. There's a ton of ways of handling that, but making benefits themselves conditional on your ability to be below a threshold, I think is always dangerous and always ends up biting the people it was meant to help more than it did to help them. Yeah. So that's my angle, and I think it's a very bad angle.
It also speaks to me to, trying to apply one standard across very different costs of living in this country. Being a head of household in Washington, D.C. and trying to live on $51,000 a year would be very difficult. You know, it might not be the same proposition if you live in Little Rock, though it's not like you would be living in luxury. And so this is another, I think, as you point out, this is another way to simply fuel resentment, right? To apply these thresholds that just are wildly different in different parts of this very big country. Yeah.
I'm a believer in citizens' benefits, whether that be for unemployment or whether that be for student debt relief, or whether that be for Medicare for all or anything else, I am 1,000%, and I will always be this. The answer will always be the same. I am for citizens' benefits. In other words, everybody should get it. And if you feel that they're benefiting too much, you can create a way of taxing that away. But I believe that everyone should get it. And once you cross that threshold, like I said, you've created wait till the next time when they can make those other people suffer. You hear people talking about like student debt right now. Well, I already paid my student debt. Why should they get any help? So this is the problem with that whole means testing approach, and some get and some don't because you pit citizen versus citizen. And there's no need, there's no financial need. The government is capable of doing this itself. No problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, Steve, hey, thanks for being here with us. You're listening to Political Misfits. Bob Schlaver, Michelle Whitty. We're joined by Steve Grumbine. You can join us on the show by calling us at 202-521-1320. That's 202-521-1320. Two things to your point, Steve, here. One is there's also moves here that is being pushed by the Republicans to disqualify those with felony records or criminal records in their past returning citizens here in our community. So the additional breakdown of breaking people into different classes and discriminating against certain people pits people against each other. And then to your second point, I mean, there was a great study, I think either Paul Krugman or a different economist that put it out, that said the Trump tax cuts, if redistributed as stimulus checks to people, could have paid out every working American $1,800 for 8 to 9 months. And so I think we still have this misconception that if another person who, and again, this is not a poor person, even middle class, upper middle class, we're all getting fleeced here. It is that top 1%. It is this crazy belief that if another person who's in the same economic bracket as I am gets a little bit, that means I won't get anything. And I think that real mental constraint is one of the biggest problems we have to get over.
You nailed it, man. You nailed it. I mean, think about how many times Republicans are bitter at people they think are getting over on welfare, or getting over on food stamps, or getting over. They're always looking that way. And part of it is because that person got a benefit, they didn't. And therefore, they are looking at that person like they're stealing their tax money. You just stole my tax dollars. And that's all they can see. So this is a hat tip to bad economics, because we know that federal taxes don't fund spending to begin with. So in my humble opinion, this is not only founded on a lie, but it's also one of those things that literally sets the stage for keeping us hating our neighbors, so that these sorts of things never come to be in the future also.
Yeah, and speaking of tax cuts, I wanted to ask you about this other thing that Democrats have been trying to do, which is repeal the $10,000 limit on state and local tax deductions, or SALT. The cap was included in Republicans' 2017 tax law, and repealing it would allow taxpayers to write off the full amount of their state and local tax bills, which was not a thing I thought people could do. Write off your state and local taxes from your federal taxes. Sounds, wish I had. No, whatever. I'm sure I don't apply there. So Bloomberg points out this change would be a boost to high tax states like New York, New Jersey, and California. I wonder. I don't know, this is being sort of set up as giving with one hand, taking away from the other, behind the scenes, Democrats sort of making moves to help the wealthiest among us. I wonder if you see it that way, and what you make of this cap and these efforts to repeal it.
So, let's be fair, we can look at this several different angles, right? Number one, the top way you can look at this is that you have a situation where money will be kept in the local community by allowing those people not to pay additional tax on that money. There's a case to be made that they've already paid that money while they're getting double taxed on it, et cetera. That notwithstanding, the fact of the matter is that plays into the whole trickle-down mindset. Okay, there is no question that money kept in the community is a boon for the community, even if it's a small boon. So there is that. But in my humble opinion, the way this looks is, once again, the poor people are not going to benefit from this. The middle class is largely not going to benefit from this. It really is the wealthy benefiting from this. And I believe this is largely a tip. If you think about who made up the Democratic convention, It was people like John Kasich and a bunch of conservative Democrats, establishment Democrats. And these people are not exactly, at the beggar's line. These people have money. And this is payola, in my opinion, to those large donors. But
I think
just never, I'm sorry, I just want to complete this one sentence. Just never forget, though, that money kept in the local community, though, it will have at least some marginal benefit. It's not like a zero sum. So I just want to make that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about this is not necessarily, I was looking at this trying to go, I'm not sure. How do I feel about this? Does it have benefits? Does it, have drawbacks? I think what is interesting is that it is a priority, right? We are only on February 3rd. Biden just yesterday got around to making some of his immigration promises or fulfilling some of his immigration promises. So why now are they moving to do this? And I think that is for exactly the reason you suggested, that this is something that is primarily going to benefit big Democratic donors.
You got it. And not to mention, it's going to benefit those wealthy Republican donors that stood up and supported Joe Biden. This could be a payback for their support as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Although it's interesting that the cap was imposed by a Republican president in the first place.
Absolutely.
So,
Yep.
The daylight between them is increasingly narrow, right?
Well, yes, and there's also something to be said for the idea here is that it would largely impact wealthy Democratic donors in typically wealthy Democratic areas. So the idea was to, in their mind, strategically to squelch Democratic donors from getting a benefit. But I think it cuts both ways, actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to now continue a conversation that we started with you last week, I believe, when we were talking about GameStop. We do now have Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen calling a meeting with financial regulators about GameStop and other Wall Street volatility, often driven by retail trading. And at the meeting, we're going to have the heads of the SEC, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, Commodities Future Trading Commission, et cetera. And contrary to what Jen Psaki said last week, Yellen has indeed sought an ethics waiver to hold the meeting, given that she's gotten at least $700,000 in speaking fees from hedge fund Citadel, who was a major player in that drama. So I wonder if you had any predictions regarding what these regulators are going to be saying, what they're going to be asking for, if anything, just what could be on the table here.
Well, going back to even the 1920s, they have shown that people have always pulled money together, pulled resources together, worked together to work the market. Anytime a hedge fund or a fund makes recommendations to their constituents, you can envision a block of those people following their advice. So I think what you're going to see here is largely a play on fighting back against the little people, sadly, because the goal here is always to make the wealthy wealthier. And so my suspicion is they're going to paint this up or chalk this up to like economic warfare, some sort of, I don't want to go so far as to call it economic terrorism, but I could see them literally bunching this as if this right here is a crime. Am I right? I don't know. But whenever you're here to protect capital, you're certainly not protecting the little guy that just took down capital.
Yeah. Yeah, and they do love to call things terrorism. I mean, I think that wasn't something that had crossed my mind, but certainly I could see someone coming out and very solemnly telling us that this gang of misfits, probably led by Russian disruptors, tried to quote, blow up the markets, and we have to, I'm probably like 55% joking, They tried to make filming animal abuses on farms equivalent to terrorism relatively recently, right? So we shouldn't trust him farther than we can throw him, Steve.
You're right. I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely.
Yeah. I also want to talk about this opinion piece in the New York Times today. First, I got to just complain about the title. The Times and the Post have been on this weird kick of having their opinion pages appear to be staffed by children. So this column is called, "Can we please stop talking about stocks, please?" And again, I just would really like to read an opinion page not written by third graders. But The theme of the column is, surprise, surprise, that the stock market is not the economy. And of course, I don't think any of us here disagree with that. But as the author makes his points, he misses, I think, the bigger picture. He says, yes, of course, the stock market is very much divorced from the economic reality that most of us live in. But I don't think that means our attitude toward it should be, as one paragraph suggests, issuing stock reports with the same caveat palm readers issue when telling your fortune, for entertainment purposes only. It's a slightly more complicated column than I'm giving it credit for being, but he does sort of say, like, this is for entertainment purposes. We shouldn't take this seriously. We should focus on the real economy and what that means for people. And sure, that's all true. But the stock market and the financialization of so much of our economy is what I think allows a wealthy few to accumulate and solidify real power. I think in that sense, you can make an argument that it is potentially anti-democratic, in the sense that this is how through the stock market is how you have someone become a trillionaire. There's no other way to do that, I think, other than through financial manipulation. You can't make a widget that's going to earn you $1 trillion. And so it's great to recognize that the stock market isn't the economy. But Steve, I wanted to ask what you make of this idea that we should just turn our eyes away from it and it acts like it doesn't matter. I think it really does matter economically and politically.
Well, so first things first, we repealed Glass-Steagall back in, Clinton era. And, we have seen nothing but bursts and bubbles and lots of crashes since then. And we don't have a regulatory body strong enough to manage shadow banking and Wall Street, et cetera. I think there's some 2,000 different industries, and there's hardly any regulators out there managing this. I think what this is a scream, if you will, for re-regulating Wall Street, re-regulating banking in general, re-regulating finance as a whole, and making banking boring again. And unfortunately, the cost to us is really in terms of asset inflation and all kinds of different games that are being played that really dramatically impact wealth inequality in America. So from a standpoint of ignoring it, absolutely not. We need to regulate the hell out of it. As individuals, though, you got to realize that you're never going to get rich on an hourly wage. There's got to be a way to force multiply your money, and that's where investment money comes in. Unfortunately, most of us don't have enough money sitting around for us to go ahead and make a real dent by investing, and a lot of us don't have enough knowledge of the market to invest in the right things, and then we lose everything. So the market is definitely not the real economy, but the real economy is fueled by the market.
I personally keep hoping against hope that I can invest $20 in this or that cryptocurrency. And somehow that's going to turn into a retirement account. And you'll be surprised to learn it hasn't yet, but I'm still investing in amounts I can afford to lose, which don't generally exceed $15 or so. But so if we are talking about re-regulating this, Steve, just where do you start? I don't need you to give me an entire regulatory ecosystem, but if you had your dream team in the White House, what would be step one and step two?
Step one would be to separate banks from investment capital. Banks would be doing banking, they would be handling savings, they'd be handling basic loans, but then our investment side would be completely separated, and it would be run and monitored by all kinds of different regulators to ensure that fraud and corruption are completely wiped out. That is pie in the sky to think you could wipe it all out. But the reality is that if you don't have some sort of separation between the investment side and the banking side, you end up stuck with bubbles like what we've seen with the housing market, the student loan industry, even a ton of other asset bubbles waiting to burst. And I think that's number one. I think number two really comes down to really ensuring that insider trading is clamped down on and squashed, and that there's no such thing as too big to jail, that every one of these individuals is right And then that last thing, let me just say the last thing, the most important thing I would do is have what they call a Pecora hearing. Ferdinand Pecora was the guy that tried the Wall Street bankers during Great Depression. And so by sitting there routing out corruption back then, we haven't seen anything like that in the last, 100 years. It's time. We need a new Pecora hearing right here, right now. In fact, on February 14th, we'll be launching a 5-part series called The New Untouchables that talks directly about the countrywides and all the other fraud and corruption. And we have everyone from federal prosecutors down to regulators like William Black, and people that actually were the whistleblowers at Countrywide. So this is all stuff that has never been dealt with, and that would be my dream team, is to tackle Wall Street fraud and corruption with a new Pecora hearing.
I love that. I love how specific it is. It's great. I'm very excited about that announcement, Steve. Can I ask you then also what happened, right? If we had this happen back in the 1930s, what's been the trajectory that led us to this state of affairs where every once in a while, like a Martha Stewart falls afoul of the law and is made an example of, but basically we have all of these venture capitalists and investment bankers breaking laws every day and getting away with it?
You got to go backwards. You got to go back in time, and you've got to look at when we repealed Glass-Steagall. You got to look at all the different times we've deregulated things, and look that the opportunity is there for these people who are typically seen as too big to jail, falling down. Every once in a while, someone gets snared in the trap. I don't know whether they ran afoul of someone from some midnight poker game or whether they just didn't vote the right way. But very rarely do you see any of these people ever even get into jail, much less go to trial. So, our job as citizens and our job as a government is to make that not the case and make it so that everyone is treated fairly within the law, and that means attack the people that are abusing it as well.
Yeah. And I think our job also as citizens, and particularly our job in the media, is to be historically educated enough to recognize when the same arguments are cycling again and again. Because I think you see this, of course, far beyond the realm of economics. You see it when it comes to the drug war. You see it in foreign policy. You see it everywhere, really. The same arguments are used over and over to do things that surprisingly have the same results, and I think it behooves us really to make sure that our memories go back at least 20 years so we can remember this stuff and point it out to people, because it does feel sometimes like, we live in a media environment that is constantly discovering its own navel, and is fascinated and, acts like it buys into all of these, absolutely dishonest, patently untrue justifications for these things. And I think that is another aspect of this fight. I also want to shift gears a little bit here and talk about ethics and the Biden administration. I don't know if you saw this story about Joe Biden's brother and his kind of sleazy seeming Florida law firm. But the Washington Post read about it this morning, and it's possible that they're trying to declare that the Biden honeymoon is over. I guess Frank Biden joined this law firm in 2018, and ever since then, it's been boasting about him on social media. In 2019, you had the firm boasting that Frank Biden would offer clients an unrivaled personal network of contacts, and the firm now keeps publicly lining up its lawsuits with relevant aspects of Joe Biden's platform and publicly noting the family connections. It's filed some strange, supposedly enormous lawsuit against China over the coronavirus. And really, it all seems sort of sleazy and embarrassing, more for the law firm than I think for the White House. But, this is a White House that came out against office bullying, I think on day 1 or 2, and yet hasn't made public an ethics policy with regard to Biden's family members. And the story in the Post notes that an anonymous White House official said, look, there's a process in place to address conflicts of interest as they arise, but they wouldn't give any details. And so my question is, I don't think this law group is any kind of major player. Like, I'm not on fire over them appearing kind of pathetic on social media. So I wonder if you think there's any more to make of this. either this particular story, the lack of ethics policy so far, the actual actions of Frank Biden, or the way the Post is covering this story as compared to other Biden ethics issues?
So number one, the honeymoon is never over. They give the appearance of attacking by taking these non-stories and making them a story. This guy right here clearly should be addressed for saying that he had some sort of power over the administration. It certainly doesn't look good. It's certainly dirty. Should there be ethics violations and should there be ethics investigations? Absolutely. Will there be? Probably not. But I think, honestly, the election's over, so it's safe now to make these little teeny pot shots to make it appear like they're being fair and even-handed when we clearly saw that that's not how they operate.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point.
And then from the standpoint of Joe Biden in general, I think that he's got a lot more skeletons in that closet than this one. So this is small potatoes in the great.
I think that is what I was thinking. Sorry, Bob, I know you have a point to make, but that's exactly what I was thinking, Bob, is this all just reads like not very much. And this is what you put on the front page. That to me was kind of interesting.
I would like distract with like a false flag case of that. I hear you, Michelle. What happened to Hunter Biden's computer? That's what we all want to know still. Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, for me, it just like speaks and it reeks really to the larger issue of the two-party system, that the people that are in power in these parties, and more so I think in the Republican Party than the Democratic Party, are people that have wealth, that have deep connections with political institutions that go back to their great whatever family member who was already part of the institution. I mean, I remember meeting some Republican aldermen when I was back in Northern Illinois. Rockford, Illinois is where I'm from, Michelle. And when I was there, you're meeting these young people, and they're all either like the children of bankers or the nephew of a real estate agent. They all have a ton of money and wealth, Steve, that they can just run for office full-time all the time. When a lot of us are just struggling to survive, or a lot of people that, in my opinion, have the best policies, either work in the nonprofit sector or stay out of politics in general because it's so hard to get anything done. And so the Biden administration now really reeks of that. And I think more people that kind of drained the swamp line that Trump used, but obviously didn't drain any swamps. It's stuck with people because I think people are sick and tired of this corruption, of family members of Joe Biden and of other people getting promoted simply because of their last name.
100% agree with that. It is all about name and that little teeny clique and keeping money and keeping power right where it exists. That's the plan. I think that's the deal too, but.
Yeah, and Steve, before we let you go, let me, Bob, do you want to follow up? I'm just going to change gears a little bit.
No, I'm just going to rip on the people. Kyle Logan's the guy's name, that alderman in Rockford that is a scumbag. I just want to make sure we're naming people and putting it out there. Yeah, but these conversations, Michelle, and then I guess it's just the arrogance, which really drives me nuts, because these people think they deserved it. Jared Kushner, I promise you, he 100% believes that he should be the president's aide, one of his top aides the last 4 years. Jared Kushner absolutely believes that he is qualified to do so. And that's what's so sickening, even though these people, there was I was watching something, Michelle, where they had these two players come in and they would play Monopoly against each other in this social experiment. And one of the Monopoly players would be already started with half the amount of money. They would only get to roll one dice compared to the other person's two dice. And then they had the people play. And so inevitably the person with getting to roll twice as much, go around, collect $200 each time they pass go, that person would inevitably win. And then that person would start like talking smack to the other person. And then they ask them, why do you think they won? And they just said, well, because I'm better at the game. And so these people, even though the system is rigged, the whole social experiment is just show that this whole thing is rigged. These people in positions of power think they deserve it, and they're doing something exceptional to be in those positions of power.
Yeah, and Steve, I think that this goes back to the point that you started this segment really making, is that this means testing is a way of dividing people, right, and creating resentment between different groups. I think that also, is an active force in the way we frame these whole conversations. It's not about making people whole with some of these payments. They're always treated as a handout. They could even be treated sometimes as a gift. I don't think calling them survival checks really makes much of a difference. It's always treated as a little extra help, which helps, I think, divert attention from the fact that we are being actively robbed. The workers of this country are being actively robbed in ways that the wealthy among us are not every single day in this system. So it's not us getting a gift. It's getting a tiny fraction of our money and our labor that's being stolen. And yet, we don't see the lens turned that way on any aspect of the system. And it's constantly, sort of like we're baby birds waiting to be fed.
Nailed it exactly. I mean, the fact is that they always turn it around like the people that need checks have done something wrong in their lives. This is a hand up, because after all, every one of us occasionally needs some help, right? And so they make it out like this, and it's really a setup for long-term shut up and eat your peas. And I think it's time for us to really take that bull by the horns and kill it, man. Kill that sucker, because that right there is holding us all back.
I love it, Chris. It's great to hear from you again. I'm very excited about this new series coming out. Steve Grumbine here, not invincible, but doing a very good job of convincing us all that you might be. Before we let you go, tell our listeners where they should go to hear more of you.
Yes, please come to our website, www.realprogressives.org. Also, check out our podcast. You can find it on every podcast platform, which is Macro, the letter N, cheese. And by all means, hopefully I'll be back in the saddle doing video here soon, now that COVID has finally started passing from me. And I'll be back in the video chair here shortly, too, so you'll find us on YouTube and Facebook.
All right. Well, Godspeed, Steve. Take care of yourself. Always great to talk to you. And we're going to take a break here. You're listening to Political Misfits. We're on Radio Sputnik. We're live in D.C., and we'll be back right after this.